it's three that look real attractive to me right now. Camron, Mase, and Sean.
Ray J might have crashed out a little too hard, because when he called out Camron and Mase for saying some weird stuff about his sister, his health took a massive dip. The streets are abuzz with all this drama. So let's get into it. The podcast that lit the fuse. All right, so check. Some stories don't come out the gate loud. They don't announce themselves. They don't pull up with the hazards on and the sound system rattling the block. They creep. They start off like background noise. Two dudes on a podcast just vibing, just talking their talk, just running through old memories like they're flipping through a photo album nobody else was supposed to see. And for a second, just a second, it feels like nothing, like regular content, like another Tuesday. And then somebody's phone buzzes on the other side of the country. And whoever is holding that phone, that person does not do Let It Slide. That person has never done Let It Slide. That person invented the concept of we are not going to let this slide. And now the whole thing is about to go left in the most spectacular, most documented, most quotable way imaginable. Three names are at the center of everything that's about to unfold. Camron, Mase, and Ray J. But real talk, before any of that, there is one name that matters more than all three of them put together. One name that was in that podcast conversation when it didn't need to be. One name that the second it left somebody's mouth on camera made this entire situation inevitable. That name is Brandy Norwood. Grammy-winning legend, R&B royalty. The voice that had a whole generation of kids glued to Marshall reruns. An absolute icon in every room she's ever walked into. And most critically, most consequentially, most relevantly for everything that is about to pop off, Ray J's big sister. And if you know anything at all about how the code works in this culture, if you spent even a few years around hip-hop, around R&B, around the whole ecosystem of how celebrity men relate to each other's families, then you already know. You don't casually put another man's people in your mouth on a public platform and expect the culture to just keep it moving. Camron and Mase apparently needed that reminder delivered personally. And Ray J, he was more than happy to be the delivery man. But before we get to the crash out, before we get to the threats, the clause announcements, and the one sentence that explains all of it, we need to zoom all the way back and establish exactly what got said. Because without the context, the reaction just looks like noise. And this is not noise. This is beef with a paper trail. So let's talk about who Camron and Mase actually are, because the weight of this whole situation lives inside that answer. These are two certified Harlem legends. Two men who helped build the aesthetic and the vocabulary of an entire era of New York hip-hop. The Pink Tims, the wave, the whole diplomatic vibe. These are not random internet personalities who got lucky with a camera and a ring light. These are men who put in real work and earned real credibility in culture, and in recent years have parlayed all of that into a second run as podcast hosts and commentators. They sit down, they clown around, they reminisce, they drop opinions, and most days that's fine. That's the content. But there's one rule, one unwritten, universally understood rule, that should not need to be spelled out to men of their experience. You don't pull other people's family into your stories like they're free game. You just don't. On what looked from the outside like a regular episode. Shine posted up in room 2. The conversation found its way to Brandy. And when it did, Mase decided it was his moment. His moment to share something he'd apparently been sitting on for a while. Something he broke down for the audience with the complete unbothered confidence of a man who has absolutely no idea that somewhere across the country, a phone is about to buzz. And the word he chose to describe what he and Brandy were, just one word, heavy word. A word that does a lot of work with very little noise.
I was special, you know? He came in and wanted to be special. So I had to let him be special.
Special, not official, not her man, not her boo, not even we were talking. Special, which in the full vocabulary of how men in this culture describe female connections, they can't quite name out loud. Special is doing some very serious lifting. And in case anyone in the audience was still squinting at that, still trying to figure out exactly what tier of the roster Mase was operating on, he did what any self-respecting storyteller from the golden era would do. He reached into the bag and pulled out the most recognizable basketball analogy of the last 30 years.
I mean, no lies told. He was Shaq.
Okay.
He was the champion. He was the MVP.
Shaq was the anchor, the undeniable, unmovable double-double every single night. Can't lead him off the court centerpiece, which put Mase, Pastor Mase, the man who famously left a rap game to find God, and then came back to it anyway, in a very particular spot on the depth chart.
Right.
I was Kobe, no pun intended, because they said Kobe was a special friend of Brandy's as well.
He dropped Kobe with a no pun intended that had every single pun fully intended and gift-wrapped. Because if you're tapped into the culture and you know the widely discussed connection between Kobe Bryant and Brandy Norwood that ran through that whole era, then Mase just said a whole lot in a very small number of words. The man basically drew a whole org chart right there on camera and placed himself on it with zero hesitation. No cap, no shame, no pause.
But I definitely did want to be special. I definitely, but I had no idea.
But here's where the whole situation starts getting messy, because Mase was moving through the situation blind. He didn't know the full picture. He was operating on his own lane, running his own plays, and he might have kept running them forever if it weren't for one very specific, very treacherous variable that entered the picture and absolutely fumbled the bag on his behalf. A mutual friend, the most dangerous character in any story like this. The person who knows too much and cannot under any circumstances, not once, not ever, keep their mouth shut.
So I'm not. I think he know who it is.
Right.
I'm not gonna expose him.
He's got the name. He knows exactly who the snitch is. He's choosing to let them breathe today, which is generous, honestly, and which stands in extremely sharp contrast to what Ray J is about to do when it comes to giving people a pass. But before we get to Ray J, we got one more story to get through, because Shine, sitting in that same room in that same conversation, had his own Brandy chapter to open up. And Shine's chapter wasn't about being special. Shine's chapter was about the kind of love that gets built before you even have a vocabulary to describe it. The hood dream, the poster on the wall, the face on the screen when you're still just a kid from the block trying to imagine a bigger world. Shine, Brooklyn raised, 10 years locked up, came home and rebuilt his whole life. Didn't just have a celebrity story about Brandy. He had a formation story. Because for Shine, Brandy wasn't just a woman he met in the industry. She was the actual literal childhood dream personified. The girl on MTV, the girl on Masha, the girl on BET that a poor kid from Brooklyn put up on a pedestal before he knew what pedestals were for.
So I was so excited because this is my dream person.
Right. Talk about Brandy.
Brandy.
Right.
I'm a poor kid, Brooklyn, watching MTV, watching Moesha, watching her on BET.
This wasn't some industry situationship he stumbled into. This was foundational. This was built into the walls of who Shine became before he even started stacking. And when he finally made it, when the Brooklyn kid arrived at the level where that dream was actually within arm's reach, he didn't hesitate. He did not ask questions, did not overthink it, did not waste a second. He came in with a plan which coordinates with what he described in his own words as a sniper mentality.
As a dreamer, I'm like, man, if she was to know Shine,
Right.
I got that.
Right.
So when I came up, she was in the crosshairs. Like, I was sniping.
Now, and this part is important because it explains how we get from two dudes on a podcast reminiscing to Ray J is threatening to give people diseases. For Camron and Mase, this whole conversation was just content, just stories, old memories from a time when the culture was different and the stakes seemed lower. Two veterans talking their bag, cracking up, running it back, and in basically any other context with basically any other set of names attached to it. That's just a podcast doing what podcasts do. Harmless, low stakes, just vibes. But this wasn't any other context. This was Brandy. And Brandy has a little brother. And that little brother was somewhere in Los Angeles when his phone buzzed. And whatever he saw when he looked at the screen turned everything in him from 0 to 100. So fast, it probably gave him whiplash. Because from that moment on, there was no version of events where Ray J was going to sit on his couch, breathe deeply, and choose peace. There is no timeline in any universe where that happens. What happened instead is the reason this video exists. The app flopped. Time to escalate. Real quick, before we get into the specifics of Ray J's response, let's make sure everybody in the room understands exactly who we're dealing with. Ray J, born William Ray Norwood Jr., is not the type of man to receive upsetting information and respond with a calm, measured statement released through a publicist 48 hours later. That version of Ray J does not exist, has never existed, will not exist. The man is an open nerd with a camera phone and a platform, and he operates at full volume in all conditions. He is by any meaningful definition built different, which in this case means built to say the thing the whole thing, and every additional thing he thinks of between saying the thing and the thing after that. So when the news about Camron and Mase's podcast conversation reached him, the question was never will he respond. The question was how long until somebody physically removes the mic from his hand. His first move was to pull up on his own platform, a streaming and social media app called Ryanball, and let absolutely everything he had stored up inside him fly in real time with no filter, no handler, and no thought given how any it would land. He said what he said. He said it loudly. He said it thoroughly. He said it with the energy of a man who had been storing the speech for years and was just waiting for the right occasion to deploy it.
Here's what I did. I went on my new app Ryanball and I went big on it. It was ugly.
And given everything that comes later in the same interview, given the specific, creative, biologically inventive things Ray J is about to say to the camera, The word ugly from earlier in the timeline is doing an enormous amount of work.
I felt like it didn't get nowhere. Cause I said, yo, I said the most disrespectful shit to these bitch ass, right?
All that smoke, all that energy, the whole bag emptied out on a platform, the internet just kept scrolling. Didn't even slow down. Didn't pause to acknowledge the body on the floor. Just kept moving to the next trending topic. Like Ray J hadn't just went nuclear on his own app. And this right here is a moment where Ray J switched from reactive to strategic. Because if the app wasn't going to carry the message to the people who needed to hear it, then he needed to find a room where the whole culture was already gathered and ready to listen. He knew exactly where that room was. I'm gonna go to Plan B. I'm about to hit the Breakfast Club. The Breakfast Club, not a random morning show, not just a syndicated radio program. A full cultural institution. The place where hip-hop goes to put things on record, to announce beefs, settle scores, make declarations, and say the things that need to be heard by the whole block at the same time. When you tap in with the Breakfast Club, you are not having a conversation. You are making a broadcast. You are standing on the corner and calling out names loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear them. And Ray J, still boiling from watching Camron and Mase laugh about his family on camera, was already dialing them up. But before the Breakfast Club, before Plan B could fully cook, Ray J sat down for what was described as an unfiltered interview. And whoever put the word unfiltered on that description was working with remarkable understatement. What followed was not just unfiltered. It was raw. It was live from the trenches. It was the kind of celebrity moment that makes you put your phone down, look at the wall for a second, and then immediately pick the phone back up, because you are not missing a single second of this.
I'm gonna go to Plan B. I'm about to hit the Breakfast Club.
That was the initial verdict. Corny, which given the next 8 minutes of content that was about to come flying out of Ray J's mouth, like he'd been stress testing this rant in the mirror for a week, might be the single most calm, measured, gentle word that appears anywhere in this entire story.
Let's talk about it. So basically, the fact that when they were sitting and having a conversation about Sean dating Brandy and Mase dating Brandy, you called me because you was like, yo, it was corny.
Camron and Mase on their set in their element, having a good time in the context of a conversation that had his sister's name running through it. And to Ray J, that laugh was not just a social observation. That laugh was a receipt. That laugh told him everything he needed to know about how much respect these men were operating with. And once Ray J decided he had enough information, he didn't need 5 minutes to cook up his response.
I looked online and then I saw them was laughing, and that's all I needed to see.
First shots fired. The suits get violated immediately. He didn't even warm up. Just went straight at the drip, like it was the most pressing issue on the table. And then with the momentum of a man who has been holding this in and is experiencing the very specific relief of finally letting it go, he turned his attention to appearances. May specifically had reminded Ray J of someone animated, someone yellow.
That's it. It didn't even take me 5 minutes to go, y'all is some hoe ass and cheap suits.
And then he landed the line, the single cleanest articulation of his entire complaint, sitting right in the middle of the wildfire.
Mase looking like he from The Simpsons, and Camron looked like he just had a stroke.
And it gets even worse from here.
And y'all gonna get in that period. Y'all gonna get everything y'all needed to get done, because y'all acting like all y'all do is talk about females.
There it is. That's the entire grievance dressed down and placed on the table. These men, in Ray J's view, use women's names and women's stories as content and counted on the culture, not pushing back hard enough to make it cost them anything. And Ray J had decided loudly and at length that he was going to be the cost. What he said next, though, the movies he referenced, the announcements he made, and the moment Lauren finally had to call the whole thing, that's going to need its own chapter, because what's coming is something that does not fit inside a paragraph. What's coming needs room to breathe. All gas, no brakes. The full crash out. I'm coming off the closet.
I'm coming out the closet. It's 3 niggas that look real attractive to me right now. Camron, Mase, and Sean.
All 3 of them named Camron, who Ray J kept calling Tamron throughout, which is its own level of shade. Mase and Shine, who now that he'd been formally added to the lineup, required his own specific portrait to be painted quickly and with apparent relish. Lauren, still trying to introduce some nuance into the situation, noted that this wasn't Shine's first time telling this Brandy story, that Shine had talked about this before, and maybe the repetition made it less of a fresh violation.
That ain't Shine. You know that ain't Shine.
This is not the first time that Shine told this story, right?
Ray J processed that information, waited, and arrived at a verdict with the speed of a man who had already decided hours ago.
Man, that Shine, bro. That thought he was, believes me, that thought that the was something.
And here's where something real started coming through the smoke. Because buried inside all of the theatrics, Ray J was building a point about hypocrisy. A grounded, specific, traceable point. And to make it, he told a story about a time when Camron had done exactly the right thing, done it without hesitation, done it with a kind of decisive, no questions asked energy that the culture respects. Ray J said he had seen Camron check somebody for stepping out of line with his homeboy's girlfriend, reportedly in connection with a situation involving someone named Joe Wilson. According to Ray J, Camron had shut it down. No conversation, no debate, just this is over. This ain't happening. You don't move like that with somebody's people, which means Camron knows the code. He has applied the code. He has enforced the code when the woman in question was connected to someone in his circle.
I seen that Camron check a because he was trying to get at his homeboy girlfriend.
He had the receipts on Camron, knowing exactly what the code requires, and then turning around and laughing about another man's sister on a podcast like that same code had an expiration date.
Keep that same energy, you hypocrite.
And if you follow the logic with the noise stripped away from it, that is actually a coherent argument. That is a real grievance with a real foundation in how the culture operates. You don't get to enforce the code selectively, protecting the women in your circle while treating the women connected to other men like they're fair game for podcast content. That's not how it works. And Ray J was not going to let it slide like it was. He then turned up the temperature further, dropping what could only be described as location intelligence, casually mentioning that he had a working knowledge of where Camron and Mase could be found.
I don't know that like that, but I know if that come to LA, like I don't know where he at, but I know where Camron and Mase at.
He knew the spots. Vegas walking around like they were untouchable, acting like the culture was watching, and then cutting clean through every layer of theatrics. Every bit, every declaration, Ray J landed the sentence that explains all of this. One sentence, undecorated, delivered with the weight of something a man has known his whole life, and doesn't need a punchline to make clear.
Like, I crash out for B. I crash out for my mom, I crash out for my pops, and I crash out for what's right.
That's it. That's the whole story. Undressed and standing in front of you. Not clout, not an internet moment, not a bid for relevance on someone else's news cycle. His sister's name is being tossed around on a podcast for laughs, and he is not built to sit in silence while that happens. He crashes out for B. The delivery around that line was spectacular chaos. The line itself was the most human thing in the room that had always been the destination. The unfiltered interview was the warm-up session, the sparring before the main event. Plan B was still loaded and aimed directly at Camron and Mase. And in case anyone needed confirmation that Ray J was still fully in his bag and had no intentions of cooling off before that appointment, a separate short drop from around the same time period. Ray J still speaking directly and aggressively to all three men with the specific locked-in intensity of someone who's been running off adrenaline since early morning and has not once considered slowing down.
Stooges, and y'all looking real attractive. So when I see y'all bet not have that skirt on.
So here we are. Let's account for the inventory. In the span of this crash out across the app, the unfiltered interview in the short, Ray J has violated the suits, animated Mase, diagnosed Camron, come out of multiple closets, named all three men as object of specific interest, questioned Shine's entire post-prison identity, cited Cameron's pink wardrobe as evidence of lifestyle choices, referenced Pulp Fiction in a context nobody asked for, issued a disclaimer about the Pulp Fiction reference, and promised Camron and Mase a venereal, disease that science has not yet classified, sighed, all while pointing toward a Breakfast Club appearance that was still waiting patiently on the other side of all of it. Here is what deserves to be said, though. What is actually real in all of this? Underneath every layer of theatrics and every sentence that made Lauren reconsider her career choices, Camron and Mase are two powerful men with massive platforms that they use to talk about the culture, about people, about women. Brandy Norwood is a private person, a legend, but a person who did not raise her hand to be recurring podcast content for anybody. And Ray J, for all the spectacle of how he got there, was moving from a place that is deeply recognizable to anyone who's ever had somebody they love talked about like they were a prop. The brother code is not theoretical. It is not performed. It is the thing that wires you before you even know it's wiring you. And when it goes off like this. He crashes out for B. He said it once, right in the middle of the storm. And it landed harder than everything else, because it was the only thing in the whole crash out that didn't need a costume. No theatrics, no movie references, no venereal disease science. Just B is his sister. Her name was in somebody's mouth on camera. And he was never going to be the man who sat still while that happened. In the full, complicated, genuinely entertaining history of Ray J's public life. The hits, the beefs, the reality TV, the apps, and all the things that make the internet love and laugh at him simultaneously. This crash out is going to sit in a class by itself, not because of the wild stuff, because of that one quiet line. Thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to watch another fascinating video like this, click on one of the boxes on your screen right now.